What happens when Hollywood's biggest talk show host goes head-to-head with royalty gone rogue? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a friendly chat about her latest ventures. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe the explosive confrontation that erupted on live television last night. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was buzzing with anticipation as crew members made final adjustments to the set. Tonight's guest was none other than Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex turned media mogul, promoting her new lifestyle brand and podcast series. What the audience didn't know was that they were about to witness one of the most uncomfortable and heated exchanges in late-night television history. As the familiar theme music played and Jimmy Kimmel bounded onto the stage with his trademark grin, the studio audience erupted in applause. Kimmel, known for his quick wit and sometimes sharp commentary, seemed particularly energized tonight. He delivered his opening monologue with his usual blend of political humor and celebrity gossip, but there was an underlying tension in his voice that seasoned viewers might have picked up on. Our guest tonight is someone who needs no introduction, Kimmel announced to the crowd. She's an actress, a duchess, a mother, an entrepreneur, and according to some people, a lightning rod. For controversy, please welcome Meghan Markle. The audience applauded as Meghan emerged from backstage, wearing an elegant cream-colored blazer and a confident smile that had become her trademark. She waved to the crowd and took her seat across from Kimmel, crossing her legs and settling into what she likely expected to be another friendly promotional interview. "Meghan, thank you for being here," Kimmel began, his tone warm but with a slight edge that she didn't seem to notice. "You look fantastic. How are you doing?" "Thank you, Jimmy. I'm doing wonderful. It's great to be here with you tonight," Meghan replied, her media-trained response delivered with practiced ease. "So, you've got a lot going on these days. New business ventures, the podcast, the book deal. It seems like you're really building an empire," Kimmel continued, his smile never wavering but his eyes betraying a hint of something sharper. Meghan nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, we're really excited about everything we're building. It's all about authentic storytelling and creating meaningful content that can actually make a difference in people's lives." "Authentic storytelling," Kimmel repeated, pausing for just a moment too long. "That's interesting, because I have to ask, and I think a lot of people are wondering this. How do you balance authenticity with what some might call strategic narrative crafting?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and Meghan's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, Jimmy." "Well, I mean, you've given several high-profile interviews over the years, each one seeming to reveal new details about your experiences. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, various podcast appearances. Sometimes the details seem to evolve. How do you maintain consistency in your storytelling?" The studio audience began to sense the shift in tone. Meghan's posture stiffened slightly, though she maintained her composure. "I think what you're referring to is simply the natural process of reflecting on experiences and sometimes remembering additional details or gaining new perspectives over time. That's just human nature, Jimmy." Sure," Kimmel nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "But some critics have pointed out specific inconsistencies. For instance, the timeline around when you and Harry actually got married. In one interview, you mentioned having a private ceremony 3 days before the public wedding, but then later that detail seemed to be clarified or adjusted." Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding and misrepresentation of what I've said. The media has a way of taking comments out of context and creating narratives that aren't accurate. But these were your own words, in your own interviews," Kimmel pressed, his tone remaining conversational but with an undercurrent of challenge. "I'm just trying to understand how viewers should interpret these different versions of events." "There aren't different versions, Jimmy," Meghan replied, her voice carrying a slight edge now. "There's my truth, and there's the way certain people choose to interpret or misrepresent it." "Your truth," Kimmel repeated, nodding slowly. "That's a phrase you use a lot. But isn't truth supposed to be, well, singular? Either something happened, or it didn't, right?" The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Audience members were exchanging glances, and the camera operators were positioning themselves to capture every nuance of the exchange. I think that's an oversimplification of how memory and experience work, Meghan responded, her media training kicking in as she attempted to steer the conversation back to safer ground. When you've been through traumatic experiences, when you've been subjected to intense scrutiny and harassment, sometimes it takes time to process and articulate those experiences fully. And I can understand that, Kimmel said, his tone softening slightly before sharpening again. But when you're using a global platform to share those experiences, don't you think there's a responsibility to be as accurate as possible? Especially when your words can impact other people's reputations and livelihoods. Meghan's eyes flashed with something that looked like anger, though she quickly masked it. I've always been honest about my experiences, Jimmy. If that makes some people uncomfortable, perhaps they should examine why. It's not about making people uncomfortable, Kimmel countered. It's about accountability. When you make serious accusations about racism, neglect, or mistreatment, those accusations have consequences. Shouldn't there be some consistency in how those accusations are presented? The studio fell silent except for the low hum of the cameras. Meghan leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Are you suggesting that I'm lying about the racism and mistreatment I experienced? I'm not suggesting anything, Kimmel replied evenly. I'm asking questions that I think a lot of people have. Questions about consistency, about the evolution of certain narratives, about the timing of certain revelations. The timing? Meghan's voice rose slightly. You mean like how convenient it was for me to speak out about being mistreated? Is that what you're implying? Kimmel held up his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. I'm not implying anything. I'm directly asking. Because the pattern seems to be that these revelations come at very strategic moments. Before major interviews, before product launches, before book releases. The audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Meghan's composure was beginning to crack, and Kimmel showed no signs of backing down. So now you're accusing me of fabricating trauma for publicity. Meghan's voice was getting louder, her careful media training beginning to slip away. I'm not accusing you of anything, Kimmel said calmly. I'm asking questions. Isn't that what journalists are supposed to do? You're not a journalist, Jimmy. You're a comedian. And right now, you're being incredibly disrespectful and harmful. Meghan shot back, her mask of composure finally beginning to slip completely. The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and it was clear that neither party was willing to back down. What had started as subtle probing was quickly becoming a full-scale confrontation, and the studio audience could sense that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, his expression remaining calm despite the growing tension. Look, Meghan, I think we both know that comedy and journalism often overlap. And when public figures make public statements that affect public discourse, those statements deserve scrutiny. Scrutiny. Meghan's voice was incredulous now. This isn't scrutiny, Jimmy. This is a hit job. You invited me here under false pretenses, pretending this would be a normal promotional interview. And instead you're ambushing me with conspiracy theories and accusations. I'm asking legitimate questions, Kimmel responded, his tone growing firmer. Questions that millions of people are thinking but are too afraid to ask because they'll be labeled as racist or insensitive. But I think we can have an honest conversation about consistency and accountability without hiding behind those labels. The studio audience was now completely transfixed, some looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward in their seats. The camera operators were working overtime to capture every expression, every gesture, every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. You want to talk about hiding behind labels? Meghan's voice was rising steadily. Let's talk about how you're hiding behind the guise of just asking questions to perpetuate harmful narratives about me and my family. You're giving voice to the same people who have been attacking us for years. Or maybe, Kimmel interjected, I'm giving voice to people who have legitimate concerns about the inconsistencies in your story. People who feel like they've been gaslit into accepting whatever version of events you're presenting at any given moment. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement caused a ripple of gasps throughout the studio audience. Gaslit? Are you serious right now? You're going to sit there and tell me that I'm gaslighting people by sharing my own experiences? I'm saying that when your experiences keep changing, people have a right to question them. Kimmel replied, remaining seated but his voice growing stronger. When you claim certain conversations happened, and then other people who were allegedly present say they didn't happen that way, what are people supposed to think? They're supposed to think that maybe, just maybe, the people who have been protecting an institution built on secrecy and tradition might not be the most reliable sources. Meghan shot back, her hands gesturing emphatically. They're supposed to think that when multiple people corroborate experiences of racism and mistreatment, there might be some truth to it. But that's just it, Kimmel said, leaning forward now. The corroboration seems to come primarily from you and Harry. When pressed for specifics, when asked for details that could be verified, the story becomes about protecting privacy or not wanting to hurt people. You can't have it both ways, Meghan. You can't make explosive accusations and then hide behind privacy when asked for evidence. The tension in the room was now electric. Meghan's face was flushed, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Evidence? You want evidence? Of racism? You want me to produce recordings of private conversations where people discuss the color of my unborn child's skin? I want consistency, Kimmel replied firmly. I want the same level of detail and transparency that you demand from everyone else. Because right now, it feels like you're asking the world to take your word for everything while simultaneously changing key details of that word whenever it's convenient. This is unbelievable, Meghan said, pacing slightly behind her chair. You're literally doing exactly what I've been talking about. You're questioning my experiences, minimizing my trauma, and demanding proof of racism as if it's something I need to justify to you or anyone else. I'm not minimizing anything, Kimmel said, his voice growing harder. I'm asking for the same accountability that any other public figure would face. When politicians make claims, we fact-check them. When celebrities tell stories, we verify them. But somehow, when you tell stories, we're all supposed to just accept them without question, because questioning them perpetuates harm, Meghan exclaimed, her voice now echoing through the studio. When you question the experiences of people who have faced racism and discrimination, you're not being a journalist or a comedian. You're being complicit in a system that silences victims. Or, Kimmel countered, I'm refusing to be complicit in a system that allows people to make serious accusations without providing evidence. Because that's what this is about, isn't it? You've made career-defining, institution-damaging accusations, and now you're upset that someone is asking you to back them up. The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with some people shifting in their seats and others looking toward the exits. The confrontation had moved far beyond typical late-night television territory into something much more serious and personal. Meghan stopped pacing and turned to face Kimmel directly, her eyes blazing. You know what? You're right about one thing. I am upset. I'm upset that I have to sit here and defend my right to speak about my own experiences to a man who will never understand what it's like to be a woman of color in that institution. And there it is, Kimmel said, throwing his hands up. The conversation stopper. The moment anyone questions anything you say, it becomes about race and gender. It's a perfect shield, isn't it? No one can disagree with you or ask for clarification, because that automatically makes them racist or sexist. It's not a shield, Jimmy. It's reality, Meghan fired back. The fact that you can't see that, the fact that you think my identity is something I'm weaponizing rather than something that shaped my experiences, proves exactly what I've been saying all along. What it proves, Kimmel said, standing up now to match her energy, is that you've created a narrative where any criticism, any question, any request for accountability automatically becomes evidence of the very thing you're claiming to fight against. It's circular logic, and it's manipulative. The word manipulative hung in the air like a bomb. Meghan's face went pale, then flushed red with anger. Did you just call me manipulative on national television? I called your logic manipulative. Kimmel clarified, though his tone suggested he might have meant more than that. There's a difference. No, there isn't, Meghan said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You just called me manipulative because I won't sit here and let you tear apart my experiences for your entertainment and your ratings. The studio had fallen completely, silent except for the sound of the cameras rolling. Even the crew members had stopped moving, all eyes fixed on the unprecedented confrontation unfolding before them. This was no longer just a heated interview. It had become something much more personal and destructive, with both participants seemingly determined to push the other to their breaking point. Kimmel, sensing that he had struck a nerve, decided to press further. You know what, Meghan? Let's talk about manipulation. Let's talk about how you've positioned yourself as a victim in every single narrative while simultaneously building a multi-million-dollar brand off that victimhood. Is that not manipulative? Meghan's eyes widened in shock and fury. How dare you? How dare you sit there and reduce my experiences to a business strategy? You have no idea what I've been through, what my family has endured. I know what you've told us you've been through, Kimmel shot back. But every time someone asks for specifics, every time someone wants to verify details, you hide behind privacy or trauma. It's convenient, isn't it? You get to make all the accusations without providing any of the evidence. Evidence? Meghan's voice cracked with emotion and rage. You want evidence? Fine. Let's talk about the fact that I was literally driven to suicidal thoughts by the treatment I received. Let's talk about how I begged for help and was told it would be bad for the institution. Is that specific enough for you, Jimmy? It would be, Kimmel replied coldly. If the people you claim refused to help you weren't saying that never happened. If the timeline you provided wasn't contradicted by your own public appearances during that period. If your own father wasn't saying that your version of events doesn't match reality. The mention of her father was clearly a step too far. Meghan's face contorted with rage. Don't you dare bring my father into this. A man who sold stories about me to the tabloids, who betrayed me for money. You're really going to use him as a credible source. I'm using everyone as a potential source, Kimmel said, his voice growing louder. Because when someone makes the kind of accusations you've made, you don't get to choose which witnesses count and which ones don't. You don't get to control the entire narrative. I'm not trying to control anything. Meghan screamed, her composure completely shattered now. I'm trying to tell my truth in a world that wants to silence me at every turn. There's that phrase again, Kimmel said, shaking his head. Your truth. As if truth is subjective. As if facts change based on who's telling them. That's not how reality works, Meghan. Reality? Meghan laughed bitterly. You want to talk about reality? The reality is that you invited me here tonight not to have a conversation, but to humiliate me. The reality is that you've spent the last 20 minutes trying to discredit everything I've ever said because it makes good television. That's your reality, Jimmy. My reality, Kimmel said, standing up and facing her directly, is that I've watched you spend years making serious accusations against people and institutions, destroying reputations and relationships, while refusing to provide any verifiable evidence. My reality is that when anyone questions you, you immediately play the victim and accuse them of racism or sexism. Because that's exactly what this is. Meghan shouted. You think because you're Jimmy Kimmel, because you have this platform, you can tear down a black woman who dared to speak out against a system of oppression. Well, I won't stand for it. This has nothing to do with your race and everything to do with your credibility, Kimmel fired back. And the fact that you immediately went there proves my point. You use your identity as a shield against any criticism, any accountability, any request for evidence. Meghan was trembling with rage. Now, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You know what, Jimmy? You're exactly like all the rest of them. You're exactly like the people who drove me out of that country in the first place. You can't stand that I won't be quiet, that I won't smile and wave and pretend everything is fine. No, Kimmel said firmly. I can't stand that you won't tell the truth. I can't stand that you've built an empire on victimhood while simultaneously claiming to be empowered. I can't stand that you expect everyone else to take responsibility for their actions while you take responsibility for nothing. I take responsibility for speaking out, Meghan said, her voice now deadly quiet. I take responsibility for breaking cycles of abuse and oppression. I take responsibility for using my voice to help others who don't have one. You take credit for those things, Kimmel corrected. But you don't take responsibility for the damage your accusations have caused. You don't take responsibility for the relationships you've destroyed. You don't take responsibility for the divisions you've created. Meghan stared at him for a long moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly. You really think this is going to work, don't you? You think you can tear me down on national television and everyone will applaud you for it. I think I'm asking questions that need to be asked, Kimmel replied. Questions that your other interviewers were too afraid or too starstruck to ask. Or too decent, Meghan spat. Too decent to ambush a guest like this. Too decent to try to destroy someone for entertainment. If asking for accountability is destruction, Kimmel said, then maybe your foundation wasn't as solid as you claimed. That was the final straw. Meghan's face went completely white, then flushed deep red. She looked around the studio at all the cameras, all the crew members, all the audience members watching this unprecedented meltdown. You know what? She said, her voice shaking with fury. I don't have to sit here and take this. I don't have to subject myself to this kind of abuse from someone who clearly has his own agenda. She turned toward the audience, many of whom were now filming with their phones despite studio policies. You're all witnessing exactly what I've been talking about. This is what happens when a woman of color refuses to stay in her place. This is what happens when someone dares to speak truth to power. Kimmel scoffed. The only power here is yours, Meghan. The power to make accusations without evidence. The power to destroy reputations without consequences. The power to play victim while victimizing others. Meghan spun back toward him, her eyes blazing. I'm done. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with your questions, and I'm done with people like you who think they can treat me like this. She started walking toward the exit, but Kimmel wasn't finished. Running away again, he called after her. Just like you ran from your family. Just like you ran from the royal family. It's a pattern, isn't it? Meghan stopped dead in her tracks, her whole body tensing. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around and physically confront him. Instead, she spoke without turning around, her voice carrying across the silent studio. The only thing I'm running from is people who are too small-minded and too threatened by strong women to handle the truth. The truth, Kimmel repeated mockingly. Right? Your truth. The one that changes every time you tell it. That was it. Meghan whirled around one final time, her face a mask of pure rage. Go to hell, Jimmy. The studio erupted in shocked gasps and nervous laughter. Some audience members applauded, others sat in stunned silence. Meghan didn't wait for a response. She stormed off the stage, her heels clicking loudly against the floor, leaving Jimmy Kimmel standing alone on his set, with a satisfied smirk on his face, as the curtain fell on what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about moments. In late-night television history, the cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. The audience buzzed with excitement and shock, knowing they had witnessed something truly unprecedented. Kimmel, seemingly unfazed by the dramatic exit, turned back to his remaining audience with a shrug. Well, that escalated quickly, he said, generating nervous laughter from the crowd. I guess we'll be right back after this commercial break. But everyone knew there would be no coming back from this. The confrontation had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, said things that couldn't be unsaid. In less than 30 minutes, what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview had devolved into a career-defining moment for both participants. Meghan's angry footsteps faded into the distance, and the studio slowly began to return to normal. One thing was absolutely certain. This was a night that would be remembered, analyzed, and discussed for years to come. The gloves had come off, the masks had fallen away, and America had witnessed a confrontation that laid bare the tensions and contradictions at the heart of modern celebrity culture.